The sun cast long shadows across the grand halls of the royal palace, its golden light reflecting off the polished marble floors. Prince Adrian, young heir to the throne of Eldoria, walked briskly through the corridors, his heart heavy with the weight of expectation. His father, the aging king, had called a council meeting that morning, but the nobles whispered doubts about the prince's readiness to rule. Adrian clenched his fists, feeling the sting of their words. He had always been overshadowed by his father's legacy, a king known for his wisdom and strength. Adrian yearned to prove himself, to show that he was not just a boy in a prince's robes, but a future king in his own right. As he wandered the halls, he found himself in the royal treasury, a place he seldom visited. It was a cavernous room filled with gold, jewels, and relics from the kingdom's past. He had come here seeking inspiration, a sign, anything that could give him the edge he needed. Something caught his eye though, in the far corner of the room, half buried under a dusty cloth. He approached it, pulling back the fabric to reveal a crown unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a blackened steel adorned with dark gemstones that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the design ancient. Adrian frowned, puzzled. He had never seen this crown before, and he had studied the history of every artifact in the treasury. Why was this one hidden? He picked it up, feeling a strange warmth radiating from the metal. As he turned it over in his hands, he noticed an inscription on the inside of the band. The crown of Ebenheart, bearer of fate, taker of life. A shiver ran down his spine, but he shook it off. This was his chance, a crown of such power, hidden away for generations. If he could wield it, he could prove his worth beyond question. Without a second thought, Adrian placed the crown on his head. The metal felt cold against his skin, but then it warmed, sending a tingling sensation down his spine. He took a deep breath, expecting to feel a surge of power, but nothing happened. Disappointed, he removed the crown and set it back on the pedestal. As he turned to leave, he felt a sudden wave of dizziness, his vision blurring for a moment. He steadied himself against a nearby column, shaking his head. Must be the dust, he muttered to himself. He left the treasury, unaware that he had just awakened something ancient and dark. The crown, now resting silently on the pedestal, gleamed with a malevolent light that flickered like a heartbeat. Adrian had no idea that he had taken the first step toward a fate far darker than he could imagine. Over the next few days, Adrian noticed a change within himself. He felt stronger, more confident, as if the doubts that had plagued him were fading away. He walked with his head held higher, the whispers of the nobles growing quieter in his mind. He was finally feeling like the king he was meant to be, but there were strange symptoms too. At night, he was plagued by vivid dreams, visions of battles fought long ago, of a dark figure standing atop a blood-soaked throne. He would wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of a sinister laugh ringing in his ears. One morning, as he prepared for a meeting with the council, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. He froze, staring at his reflection, his face looking paler, his eyes sunken, as if he hadn't slept in days. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, but the image was the same. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. He dismissed the thought, chalking it up to stress. He had been under immense pressure lately, and the responsibilities of the throne weighed heavily on him. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The council meeting that day was tense. The nobles were arguing about the kingdom's defenses, their voices rising in heated debate. Adrian, normally hesitant to intervene, found himself standing up and silencing them with a single word. "Enough," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority he didn't know he possessed. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Adrian's heart raced, but he didn't falter. He began to speak, outlining a plan to strengthen the kingdom's borders, his words flowing with a confidence that surprised even him. As he spoke, he saw the nobles exchanging glances, nodding in agreement. When the meeting ended, several of the older lords approached him, clapping him on the back and praising his leadership. Adrian felt a swell of pride, but there was a nagging voice in the back of his mind that wouldn't be silenced. That night, he returned to the treasury, where he found the crown of Ebenheart right where he had left it. He hesitated, then picked it up and placed it on his head once more. The same cold warmth spread through him, and he felt that rush of confidence again. "You've always had the strength within you," a voice whispered. Adrian spun around, but the room was empty. He took a step back, feeling his pulse quicken. "Who's there?" There was no answer, only the sound of his own breathing echoing off the walls. He removed the crown quickly, setting it down, but as he left the treasury, his voice lingered in his mind. a dark, soothing presence. "You will be great," it whispered, "but only if you accept your fate." Adrian shook his head, trying to dispel the voice. He didn't realize that the crown was beginning to take hold, weaving its insidious influence deeper into his soul. Adrian awoke the next morning feeling weaker than ever. His limbs felt heavy as if they were made of lead. He struggled to sit up, the room spinning around him. He caught sight of himself in the mirror and gasped. His face was gaunt, his skin almost translucent. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his hair looked dull and lifeless. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. He stumbled out of bed, making his way to the treasury once more. He had to know what the crown was doing to him. As he entered the room, he felt a familiar cold warmth wash over him, and he realized with a sickening feeling that it wasn't the crown that was changing, it was him. The crown sat on its pedestal, gleaming with a dark, sinister light. Adrian approached it, his heart pounding. He reached out to touch it, but before he could, a voice echoed in a chamber, deep and resonant. "You finally realized, haven't you?" Adrian stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" The air in the room shimmered, and a figure materialized before him. An old man with piercing eyes and a crooked smile. He wore a robe adorned with symbols Adrian didn't recognize, his presence radiating a dark, ancient power. "I am Malachar," the figure said, inclining his head, "the true owner of this crown." Adrian shook his head, backing away. "No, that's impossible. Malachar was a sorcerer who ruled this kingdom centuries ago. He's dead." The sorcerer's smile widened. "Dead, yes, but not gone. My spirit was bound to this crown long ago, waiting for a new vessel to wear it. And you, dear prince, have been chosen." Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. "You've been draining my life force," he realized, his voice hoarse. "You're using me." Malachar's eyes gleamed, very perceptive. "The crown does not give power, it takes it. Your strength, your life, it all flows into me. Soon I'll be strong enough to reclaim my throne, and you'll be nothing more than a hollow shell." Adrian's knees buckled and he sank to the ground, the weight of the revelation crushing him. He wanted to prove himself, to be a worthy king. Instead, he had become a puppet, a vessel for an ancient evil. "You can fight this," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I won't let you take me." Malachar laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "It's too late, my boy. You invited me in when you put on the crown. You gave me everything." Adrian felt the last of his strength slipping away, the room darkening around him. He had played right into the sorcerer's hands, and now the kingdom will pay the price. Adrian lay slumped on the cold floor of the treasury, the room spinning around him as Malachar's laugh echoed like a death knell. His body felt like it was made of lead, drained of energy and will. The sorcerer's spirit loomed over him, a dark silhouette, flickering like a flame in the dim light. "You were so eager to prove yourself," Malachar taunted. "You sought power, and now you have it. Not in the way you expected." Adrian's breasts were ragged, his vision blurred. He had been a fool, blinded by his own insecurities and desperation. He had thought the crown would make him strong, but instead it had made him a puppet. He clenched his fist, feeling the last remnants of his strength slipping away. "I won't let you take the throne," Adrian rasped, pushing himself up on shaking arms. Malachar stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the room. "You have no choice," he said with a sneer. "You're already mine. Your life force flows into me, feeding the power I once wielded. Soon I'll be strong enough to return, and you'll be nothing more than a hollow vessel." Adrian struggled to his feet, swaying as he stood. His head pounded, and every muscle in his body screamed in protest. But he forced himself to remain upright. "You underestimate me," he said, through gritted teeth. The sorcerer's smile faltered for the briefest moment. "You're barely standing, boy. What could you possibly do?" Adrian's mind raced. He couldn't overpower Malachar, not like this, but there had to be another way. The crown was the source of the sorcerer's power, the anchor that kept his spirit tethered to this world. If he could sever that connection, perhaps he could end this nightmare. Adrian's gaze fell on the crown, still resting on its pedestal, its dark gems pulsing like a heartbeat. It seemed to call to him, whispering promises of power and glory. He knew now that those promises were lies, a trap set by Malachar to ensnare him. He lunged for the crown, his fingers closing around the cold metal. The moment he touched it, pain shot through his body, like icy fire burning through his veins. Malachar's face twisted into a snarl. "Stop," the sorcerer roared. "You don't know what you're doing." But Adrian didn't let go. He clutched the crown with both hands, feeling the pull of Malachar's power, fighting against him. He squeezed his eyes shut, focusing on all his remaining strength on this one thought, breaking the connection. He felt the ground's hold on him weaken, just for a moment. It was like pulling away from a powerful current, every fiber of his being screaming in agony. But he pushed through the pain, refusing to let go. The room shook, the ground quaking beneath his feet. The light from the crown flickered wildly, the dark gems cracking under the pressure. Malachi's form wavered, his expression shifting from fury to fear. "You cannot do this," the sorcerer shouted. "You are nothing without me." Adrian opened his eyes, staring into Malachi's face. "Then I'll rather be nothing," he said. With a final, desperate cry, he slammed the crown against the stone pedestal. The sound of shattering metal filled the room, followed by a blinding flash of light. Adrian was thrown back, the force of the explosion knocking the air from his lungs. As he lay on the ground, darkness closing in, he heard Malachi's voice, thin and distant. "No, this cannot be." Then there was silence. Adrian awoke to the sound of muffled voices and the sensation of cold water on his forehead. He blinked, his vision slowly clearing. He was no longer in the treasury, but in his own chambers, the familiar canopy bed and velvet drapes surrounding him like a comforting cocoon. "Adrian," a voice called gently. He turned his head to see his younger sister, Elena, sitting beside him, her face etched with worry. Relief flooded her eyes when she saw him awake. "You're alive," she whispered. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his chest, and he fell back with a groan. "What happened?" he managed to say. "You've been unconscious for 2 days," Elena explained. "The guards found you in the treasury, surrounded by pieces of the shattered crown. They said there was an explosion." Adrian's mind raced as the memories came rushing back. The crown, Malachar, the desperate struggle. He had broken the connection, shattered the crown, but he could still feel a lingering chill deep in his bones, as if a piece of Malachar's darkness remained within him. "It's over," he said hoarsely. "The sorcerer's spirit is gone. The crown's curse is broken." Elena's eyes widened in shock. "Malachar, the ancient sorcerer from our family's legends? You mean he was real?" Adrian nodded slowly. "He was using me, draining my life force. The crown wasn't a gift. It was a prison for his spirit, waiting for someone foolish enough to put it on." Elena's face softened, and she took his hand in hers. "You're no fool, Adrian. You're brave. You saved us all." Adrian looked away, staring up at the ceiling. He didn't feel like a hero. He had sought power out of pride, out of the desire to prove himself worthy of the throne, and in doing so, he had almost destroyed everything. He had been a pawn in Malachar's game, blinded by his own ambition. "Elena," he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "I was wrong. I thought I needed power to be a good king, but I see now that true strength isn't about control or dominance. It's about protecting those you love, even if it means sacrificing everything." His sister squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with tears. "You've learned a hard lesson, Adrian, but that's what makes you a great king, because you understand the cost of power." He closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. He had survived the curse, but he knew that he would carry the scars forever, a reminder of the price he had paid. In the days that followed, Adrian made his first decree as heir to the throne. The remnants of the crown of Ebenheart were sealed away in the deepest vault of the palace, never to be worn again. He would ensure that no one else made the same mistake he had, standing on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the kingdom. Adrian felt the weight of the crown he had yet to wear, but this time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise, to rule not with power, but with wisdom and compassion. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden light across the land, Adrian knew he was ready.